So, welcome back to Mixed Media. Last time you heard me talk about the failure of Black Widow in the business space, the intricacies of Marvel movies, economics, and whatnot. And this time we're going to be hearing about Black Widow from a little bit of a different perspective. And Ben's going to take it away with that. So, go ahead.
All right. So, if you watched the previous segment from Irving, we heard about apathy towards the film itself and not doing so well financially. Kind of shift gears here and say that honestly, it's probably the best Marvel score. So if we're kind of going in the wrong direction with the Marvel films in terms of money, at least we're going upwards in terms of musical quality. So this is I haven't seen the film. I've only listened to the music. So, obviously take anything I say with a grain of salt, and I don't necessarily know exactly how it fits in with the screen, but just going off the music itself. So the music is composed by Lorne Balfe, who is a younger Scottish composer. I think he's only 45. Maybe I think he's 45. So younger guy. He is a former Zimmer collaborator and assistant at Remote Control Productions, like a lot of the biggest younger composers these days.
So you're saying he's one of the monkeys that went up through the ladder?
Yeah, although he's kind of a second generation though. So if like John Powell and Harry Gregson Williams are like the first generation of assistants to Zimmer, he's the second generation. He, I think, started in 2004. But unlike them too, he continues to collaborate with Zimmer a little bit more than they do, and he also does a lot more work with video games. And I don't think either Powell or Gregson Williams have done any video game music as far as I know. But he actually has done quite a bit. He's done Call of Duty, Modern Warfare.
Oh, interesting.
All of the a couple of the Assassin's Creeds. Did FIFA 19 with Zimmer. All the Skylander video games. So he's done a lot of video game stuff.
Just to interject, I've listened to since I have Modern Warfare. It's actually the only COD game I own, so good coincidence. Since I have Modern Warfare, I've listened to his stuff over and over and over again because it's a game and you're dumping a lot of hours into it. And I will say it has a very Hans Zimmer sound to it, a lot of bois.
Yeah, so he's an interesting composer. He hasn't done a ton on his own. I think he did like Terminator Genesis, Mission Impossible, Fallout, but not that much more. Mostly him is kind of that action. I don't think he's done anything really big that's not an action film. I think he's moved away a little bit from Zimmer, like being a Zimmer clone, and has his own identity, but that identity is sort of being a chameleon. So that's I'll get into that with the score. He's also, my impression of him, at least interacting with him online, not directly, but within the film composer community, he's a very nice guy. He, at the beginning of the pandemic, made a lot of his music for his Dark Materials, which he's scoring the TV series. He made a lot of that material available, like scores, parts, MIDI itself. So very nice, and seems like a really nice guy in the way he interacts with the composer community. So his score for Black Widow, like I said, from I don't know all of the Marvel scores, but from what I know, it is quite a bit better than all of them. Some of that probably comes from the fact that I think it's a little bit of a different genre than most of the Marvel films. It's kind of more of a like spy thriller a bit. At least that's how the music suggests, and what I've kind of heard about it and read from the synopsis of it. So I personally, I would say it's, as a score, it's kind of on the edge of like good and great. Could go either way. It's definitely better than like all these serviceable but really annoying Marvel scores. It's not quite on like Solo, or How to Train Your Dragon, amongst kind of recent films.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of on that edge there. What it does differently than the other Marvel scores is that it has its own unique identity, and the identity itself is not very, like, if you look at track to track, like I said, he's kind of a chameleon. It's kind of all over the place, but as a whole, it has its own identity. It's not just copying the Marvel template that gonna have pretty much nothing interesting, weird ambient synths all over the place, very little music, and then we're just gonna get 8 trombones playing the Avengers theme. Hooray! We've saved the universe. So it definitely has its, as a whole, it has its own identity, and it actually has some, what I assume. Well, I don't know how impactful they are in the film, but musically, like, impactful, personal, introspective moments, which, when Marvel scores try to do that, they fail. I've yet to find an emotionally convincing moment in a Marvel score. This has some fairly good moments like that.
They're not very memorable, I will say that. I never remember the music from a Marvel movie.
So this one, what you're gonna take from it is you're gonna take Natasha's Lullaby, which I assume plays at the beginning of the film. I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. It comes back at emotionally appropriate times, and then kind of is the end of the film as well. And that's it's not a Russian melody, which, as I said, I'll get to that in a second, but it is a melody that you can carry with you, and it works throughout the whole film. So it has that as its kind of core identity. So like I said, he's kind of a chameleon, and what I mean by that is there's a whole lot of things that this really is pulling from, in a good way, and maybe in a little bit to its detriment. We've got a lot of stuff that sounds like Goldsmith's late Bond score, so like the 90s Brosnan era of Bond, just being a little bit faster. I know I made that point when I talked about I think Goldfinger, how Bond's action tends to have kind of a slow pace.
Yeah.
It's a little bit faster paced than Goldsmith, but it's very much in his kind of later Bond world, giving it that kind of spy thriller vibe. There are some really interesting things in it, and I could go into some like really technical detail, but there are some moments that we get, like the ambient synth moments tend to be really dark and foreboding, which is not something you get with a lot of ambient synths these days. It sounds very much like the kind of ambient synths that John Williams uses in Revenge of the Sith. When like Padme is, looks out and sees Jedi temple on fire and is worrying about Anakin while Anakin's off slaughtering the children.
I never knew John Williams had synths in his work at all.
Oh, absolutely. But what he does with his synths is he writes like the notes, and then I think his name's Randy Kerber is his synth guy, and he writes like, Randy, I want you to come up with something that sounds kind of bubbly, and Randy's job is to make that sound.
Everyone needs a Randy.
Yeah,
I'd never noticed her since in his stuff either.
Oh yeah. Well, for instance, probably the most iconic but mistaken identity of a synth in his music is the Celesta at the beginning of Hedwig's theme in Harry Potter, which is not actually Celesta. And that's Randy Kerber. It's a video where he shows exactly how he created that. It's basically taking the Celesta sound, and he adds like a different kinds of saw waves, I think, to it, and plays with all these like literally the hardware of the synth to produce it, like make it a little more velvety and a little more ringing. It's not actually a real Celeste, and Randy Kerber plays that as well. So he came out with the sound and played it in the film.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So there are a lot of moments like that, and there also are some really interesting string passages that sound very much like Revenge of the Sith, Anakin fighting Obi-Wan at the end. I mean, in a very like micro level, very interesting. I doubt that was intentional, but certainly something that I noticed. Yeah, and then there's like the general Zimmer ostinatos, but his ostinatos are a lot more interesting than Zimmer's. Like the ostinatos and kind of looped percussion, because he tends to, they build, and not just like in volume. They build orchestrationally and harmonically, so that's cool. He doesn't. I don't think he does it quite as well as Powell, but it's a little bit different because this score apparently sets the record for the most musicians one time in Abbey Road Studio, which is, people who don't know, probably the most famous recording studio for like all kinds of music, anywhere in the world. From like the Beatles, obviously the album Abbey Road is recorded at Abbey Road, to a lot of the biggest film scores. So apparently the score uses probably more musicians than that, because there are woodwinds who also play occasionally, but the largest group ever in Abbey Road, 118 instrumentalists, mostly a ton of strings, and then a ton of brass, and then 60 singers. So a lot of people to squeeze into a room right before COVID. And so it gets this really thick massed effect that is kind of unusual when you get like double the amount of strings, or maybe even triple the amount of strings that people normally use in an orchestra. It's a kind of effect that you can get with your computer by just layering a million things together, but it's really hard to do that in real life. And the final element that goes into it is, I don't want to say is imitating John Powell, but there are some moments that are very much kind of out of Powell's playbook, and some of that's just the general, like, coming out of Zimmer background. But the theme that goes along with the main antagonist, I assume, it's the theme doesn't seem to be around the antagonist. I think his name is, I don't know, either Colonel or General Drakov. It's not there when he's like by himself, but like when he's like going against Natasha, Black Widow. The theme is literally da 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 da, which, if you are familiar with the
I recognize it already.
That is kind of the theme of that. I don't know exactly what you call it in Solo, a Star Wars story, but it's something like, I don't know, fate driving Kira and Han apart, something like that. Yeah, so I can't not like listen to it and not think of Solo.
But he wouldn't be that obvious, right? It has to be a coincidence. I don't know. I
really don't know. I don't know. That's a question for him if he ever does a question and answer. Well, he probably wouldn't answer that though.
Yeah, it's a pretty spicy question.
Yeah. Yeah. So those are a lot of the reasons that that it's really cool score. Like, the fact that it's borrowing from all these things, and it borrows from all these things really well and puts them together really well. It doesn't have like a kind of cohesive internal ID like from track to track because it's kind of borrowing from all these things. But like I said, overall it has its own distinct ID. Also, of course, he's trying to. Well, Balfe claims he's drawing from Russian musical tradition, but that's kind of my last point here. But yeah, anyway, it's an exciting score. It has its own identity you can latch onto overall, and also in Natasha's Lullaby. It has some really cool action writing. Balfe is really good at intense action writing. Really interesting effects with the strings, like the really fast chromatic runs and tritones of like 30 violins on top of each other. Really cool stuff. Very exciting. So if you like action music, I recommend listening to it. So like the main issues I have with it that I think keep it from being like a great score. I really wish there would have been some more woodwinds for intimacy. That's one of my big themes. If you listen to our show, I like talking about woodwinds and intimate moments. Obviously, I'm a little bit biased because I'm a woodwind player myself, but I think the exclusion of woodwinds, except for having like the flute and piccolo playing octaves and action runs, I wish there'd just be a lot more of it. That's part of why John Williams and John Powell are so great, because they use woodwinds really effectively. Also, eventually, if you listen to the whole thing, I at least find that although it's a really cool effect to have a ton of brass and a ton of strings. It's a really cool effect, but like after 40 minutes of that, it sounds a little less interesting. But that texture. Yeah. My biggest issue with it, and this is probably not something that's going to bother anybody else. I am a kind of student of Russian music. I kind of came up in the musical world by my love of Russian music, what I studied in college, something that I am still very, very involved in, and will hopefully play a big part in my future career in some way, shape, or form. I also studied Russian literature in college, so I'm going to read really quickly from something that Balfe said in one of his interviews. Let me pull it up here, about the Russianness of the music, and then we can briefly discuss whether he was successful or not. Okay, so the interviewer asks, after all this time, Natasha doesn't just have her own motif. You gave her an entire Russian-influenced musical identity. Would that be fair to say? And he says, I'd say I'm glad that you got that from the music. Yes, when director Kate Shortland and I first started talking, that was the whole point of understanding her background and telling her story, which had not been told properly before. What I said to Kate in the beginning was, look, I was interested. What's the music that those sisters would have listened to when they were children? I said, what's the folk music? Or what are the nursery rhymes? Or what's the traditional music? Lots of traditional music has made it into modern culture. With Russian music, you've got Tetris theme, for example. So I thought, what I'll do is write a fictitious folk tune. So basically, we are creating something that could have been something they listened to when they were children. And that's what the first track on the album is, Natasha's Story. A piece of music that could have come from her childhood. Musically, I was just listening to a lot of Prokofiev, a lot of Stravinsky. Russian music is fascinating because you don't necessarily need the instruments to make it sound Russian. You look at classical music, and they're not using balalaikas, which is a Russian string instrument, like traditional folk string instrument. It's a westernized orchestra, but it feels Russian. So Balfe is saying that he's trying to make Natasha's theme and the song associated with it, something that sounds like what could have been a real Russian lullaby sung to her as a child. And to do that, he was studying Prokofiev and Stravinsky, and he makes some good points. Russian music always sounds Russian, and that observation, when I made that observation for myself, that kind of set me down the path that I am on now. Like when I realized that all Russian music sounds Russian somehow, then I started asking myself why it sounds Russian, and that kind of led me to like, well, why does music ever sound the way it does? So that's a great observation that he makes, and it's great also that he makes the observation that Russian music generally sounds Russian without using a bunch of Russian folk instruments. Obviously, you can, but the orchestral tradition does not. So great. Those are great observations. And does he succeed in that? I would say categorically no.
Rip.
If you listen to it, my general impression of it, and I have listened to countless thousands of hours of Russian music, studying Russian music, going to professional music theory conferences in Moscow, discussing Russian music theory. It just isn't Russian. It sort of sounds like generic Oriental other, in a way that if you don't really know a lot of Russian music, you could maybe mistake it as, oh, okay, that sounds good enough for, a movie that doesn't actually portray real Russia anyway. At best, you could maybe say that it has kind of a flavor of like the kind of Oriental, like the Russian East, kind of like the Georgia, Armenia region, which a lot of Russian composers do try to imitate. Because it's kind of Russian music tends to have a fascination with what they consider the Oriental part of Russia. But our protagonist here is Natasha.
Who's not from that region.
Natasha Romanov, right? She is related to the Romanov family, the blood rulers of, Rus. Okay, she's not a person from the kind of mountainous regions of far occupied Russia. So that doesn't make much sense either. It's a nice theme, interesting lyrics. In case anybody listens to us and wonders what on earth they sing, or what on earth, well, there are two. It is the choir that sings behind the solo singer. So the solo singer, basically, I'll just read what she says in English. It's pretty short. But as a note to this, we can be very certain that Balfe doesn't actually know how to write in Russian, because he pauses on the word na, which is like it's a preposition, and you can't break up a preposition and its object. It sounds really weird if you do that across a phrase. It'd be like saying in English, I don't know, if you're singing a song in something like, I bought you a book. Like,
yeah,
people don't sing that way.
Yeah.
So
you hire somebody who speaks Russian proper to write the lyrics?
Well, the lyrics make sense in Russian, but you still have to figure out how to like take the lyrics that are written.
Oh, yeah,
And
I
then put them into music. So you would not pause there.
Right.
I mean, but you could get like a Russian lyricist to be like, "Hey, that doesn't sound right," or something. You know? Do you just not think that was a possibility, that it could sound awkward due to how he makes the rhythm? I mean, he should know, right? Like,
my guess is it tends to happen with anything that is Russian, in like generically stereotypically Russian in film. They just try and make it look and sound Russian enough, and that if you actually know Russian, you'd be like, well, that's stupid. Like, I don't remember what James Bond film, I think it was GoldenEye that I watched, where like, if you pause the screen and look what's like written on the newspaper, it's like, it's not a newspaper article, like things like that. But it's good enough for someone who doesn't know Russian so you're not going to question it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I'll just quickly read the lyrics. It's pretty short, just in case anybody actually wants to know what is being sung on the track. So the lyrics are, in our declining years, we love more tenderly. Shine, light of farewell, you light of final love. The shadow of the evening afterglow is filling half of the sky, but only there in the west is that glow kind of wandering about. Linger on, evening daylight. Continue longer, O enchantment. Let the blood grow weak in my veins, but may my tender feelings for you never grow weaker in my heart. You, O enchantment, O final love.
You just translate that live?
No, I wrote it down.
Oh,
but
okay.
I wasn't gonna remember what it was without writing it down. But yeah, that's my translation of it.
Pretty beast.
Yeah, and that you can't. I looked online to see if anyone else could figure out exactly what like the kind of masked background choir sings while she's singing that. You can pick out some words, but I don't think anybody can really figure out all of them. So, like they kind of repeating things like honor, honesty, struggle, bravery, strength. Words like that. Okay. So just in case you were interested in what is actually sung there, it's a weird lullaby.
Yeah.
I wouldn't sing that to my kids, but that's neither here nor there.
That's true. It is supposed to be a lullaby.
Yeah. So that's kind of the musical identity, or not musical identity, the musical core that sort of runs through the whole thing, despite all the other shifting influences and styles. It's effective, even if it's not terribly Russian. So I fail a ball on writing an actual Russian theme, but nice that he attempted to. I think it probably works for like anyone who doesn't like obsessively study Russian music or isn't from Russia. So take that with a grain of salt. Overall, right. Best Marvel score, kind of on that edge of good and great. A lot of really interesting stuff.
Cool. Yeah, no, I'm not. Well, I mean, you see, I would support Marvel if they started making good stuff overall. Like, and then maybe I'll reconsider my opinion of them. But I don't know. Hopefully this gives them more chance, or gives people more chances in the future too to do their own thing. Did you say why he was able to do his own thing, more or less, or was it just that the film's direction in general was different, or?
I would guess that, and it sounds like from the interview that he did on it that I was reading, that the director was very much, probably because of fan demand for this film, trying to make it a more personal film that kind of explores the character as a character, not as like a
ragdoll.
Yeah. Not as like a piece of paper on a stick that is being shoved around and saving the world.
Right. Cool. So I guess we go on to Nathan. Nathan has a very different topic with he's bucking the trend here. There's no Black Widow game, is there?
Not that why would they? No, I doubt it. I was saying, like, I don't think so. Not that I'm aware. I'm like, this probably just isn't one. Like, based on the fact that the character has not been a very prominent one for a long time.
Don't say that. You're gonna get a bunch of Natasha fans mad. All right.
See. Oh well, there's Avengers games, so she's probably in one of them.
She's probably in one of them. Yeah. So thank you so much for stopping by on the Mixed Media Podcast. If you're listening to the audio only on whatever podcasting platform you're at, one thing that we really want is we want to get people together, because we're all on so many different platforms. We're on Rumble, YouTube, Twitch, I don't know, Google Podcasts, Spotify, literally anywhere you can possibly think of. And so we want us all to be together. So in the description of wherever you are, literally wherever you are, there's a link to our Discord. In that Discord, we chat about, the goings-ons of the week, our hot thoughts, our hot takes on random topics here and there, and you can continue the discussion that we're having here live on that Discord server. We'd love to have you there. The first however many people who will get on that Discord server will get a title, a role that will signify that you were here first, before the crowd. And also, we would just love to hear your thoughts on this podcast, in general. What can we do better for you guys to be happier? And we've got a lot of new people come in recently, especially on YouTube. And I just want to say welcome to Mixed Media. A lot of you people, I think, are music people, so that's really cool. So let Ben know what you like, what you want him to cover, and if you would disagree with any of his hot takes on different composers. So yeah, with that, I guess we're good. We'll see you guys next week.
All right. Bye.
Listening.
Bye.